Let's read and look at these verses in more detail. Genesis chapter 30, starting at verse 6, it says, "And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, With great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had left barren, she took Zilpah her maid, and gave her Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, A troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. Verse 14 says, And Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest, and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them unto his mother, Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said unto her, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldest thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee for tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him, and said, Thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my sons. And he lay with her that night. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived, and bare Jacob the fifth son. So we're looking at mothers this morning, amen. So that's appropriate. But here in Genesis chapter 30, we're looking at the marital problems of a polygamist. Now, Jacob's intentions originally was just to marry Rachel. He fell in love with Rachel and wanted to marry her. And, of course, Laban deceived him and gave him Leah, and then Rachel, and plus their two handmaids. So we looked at last week that Jacob and Rachel and Leah were having some arguments and problems, and it's all because of jealousy, and Leah and Rachel are jealous over spending time with Jacob and having sons. And of course Rachel is barren, and we looked at some verses last week that shows that God's in control, amen. Every time a child's born, it's because God allowed that to be born, and it was God's will for that child to be born. We pointed out last week difficult days that we live in 2021. Sometimes we might think, boy, I feel sorry for those children that are born today, but they were designed for this time and for this day, amen. We looked at Revelation chapter 4, verse 11, where God says he's the one that creates everything for his pleasure, and everyone created for his glory. And so everyone that's living in 2021, that's by God's perfect design. And God intended that for everybody that's alive today to be alive during this hour. God's in control. He determines when people are born. He determines when people die. Now, man does have free will and things that happen between you and the Lord, but you just need to make sure you're ready when it's your time to go. That Bible points out that we don't have promise of tomorrow. That because Rachel is blaming Jacob for not having any sons. And instead of taking her problems to the Lord like Hannah did, she brings her problems to Jacob, and it causes some conflict. So we left off at verse 6 last week. It says, "And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me," called his name Dan. And Dan means judge. And this is where we left off last week. We looked a little bit about the tribe of Dan, how that many believe that he's going to produce. Many believe that it's the tribe of Dan that brings forth the Antichrist. We looked at some verses